Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm Fahima Mohammed, your host and relationship coach. A very warm welcome from all of us here on British Muslim TV to all of you, wherever you're streaming, whether you're watching live on Sky Channel 752 or streaming on Facebook or Twitter. We'd love to also welcome you on the show if you have any comments, queries, or questions for myself or my guest tonight. And you can join in the conversation and actually speak live to us in the studio on 01924231083. Please do ask the bell payers permission as standard network rates do apply. We have another option for you to get in contact with us if you are feeling a little bit shy and you don't want to talk, which is absolutely fine, but you can definitely still be in touch by sending in your questions or queries again anonymously if you wish to do so on our free WhatsApp service. And that number is 07585835150. These numbers are going to remain for the rest of the episode, so please do take advantage, as I will like to welcome my lovely guest all the way from the USA in Washington, D.C. We have Asumini Kasule. Salamu alaikum. I do apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, but a very, very warm welcome and so happy to have you here today with us.
No, you did just fine. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was absolutely, in admiration with the work that you do and how when we first connected, I was excited about the topic. And the topic for tonight is Lead with Love to deepen your connection with your teen. I think it's such an important topic, not just for people that are, in an actual sort of, marriage relationship. It's something that even single people need to think about in the future because not everything works out the way you plan. So it's good to have an insight regardless and to sort of prepare yourself. But before we go into the topic, could you please, tell us a little bit about yourselves? And I'm sure that the audience will be, excited to learn more about you before we divulge straight into that conversation.
Yes, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Asamini Kasule. I'm a certified youth and parenting coach, certified with Back to the Fitra and also Discover You. And I work with mothers to deepen connection with their teenagers, particularly looking at how they can connect back to themselves, connect back to Allah, and strengthen that connection and love for their teenage in a really difficult, challenging period of their childhood. And I work with married women, single women who are co-parenting as well, alhamdulillah. And I primarily focus on how to help immigrant families who come over from different parts of the world, and they're working to acclimate with the culture identity as well as the Islamic identity, and those challenges in deepening connection with their teens.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. And I love what you just said there at the end as well, because we do kind of, forget that sort of category when people are, coming from different backgrounds and cultures. And, many of us may have been settled for a while, but there are still people that come in completely new and, not having that sort of, way of connection or even anyone to turn to for any sort of assistance. And we've always heard this, and we always hear that studies show that when you're a single parent, for example, you cannot and manage your children, and they're going to end up, in a bad situation. And as much as those studies do give some sort of insight, I don't believe it's the full picture. So what I want to highlight today is, we firstly give a name and a label to teenagers. And secondly, we have this assumption that, if they are coming from a single parent or if they're teenagers, then these are the kind of, behaviors that, it's just going to happen and you got to deal with it. What's your thoughts on that? Do you believe those statistics out there? And do you think that teenagers are a problem, or is it the parenting skills?
Oh, subhanAllah, I hear a lot about these type of statistics. And I think that based on my experience, so first of all, I'm a mother of two teenage girls, 13 and 14 years old. I am a divorced mom. And I personally used to have that that belief that once I divorced, and no one ever expects to divorce, I didn't expect to divorce, that once I did that, they would be broken. It's a broken home, and there's no chance for me to have a relationship with them. And that is not true. I think it takes a parent to, for example, on my journey, to look within yourself and do healing within yourself, break some of the patterns that you might have that are unhealthy for within you so that you can connect better with your teenager. And what do I mean by that? I mean that looking at, for example, for me, the biggest challenge was perfectionism. Like I wanted to have that perfect family. I was always striving to it in my marriage, and recognizing that now that perfection is a myth, right? And perfection is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But until I did the work within myself to forgive myself, embrace the mistakes that I made, those are things that I was able to model even with my relationship with my kids, because I held myself to unrealistic expectations, doing the same thing to my teenagers, expecting them not to make mistakes, expecting them to be perfect, led to a relationship that we didn't have in terms of connection. So until I did work on myself, and for someone who's divorced, you go through a lot of fear, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and you have to work through the challenges that you might have in terms of how you're interacting with your kid's father, your co-parent, before you can even build connection with your teens. It starts with you. And so it's totally possible. There is hope. I work with clients who come in a stage where the relationship is not so strong, and they're able to shift, mainly because they've done the work and the healing on themselves to be able to build that safe space and that connection with their teenagers.
I hear what you're saying, and I love that, and I understand that we have to do the inner work. But in the meantime, those children are still there. So, are there any tips and practical sort of like strategies that while you are going through something, that you can
Mhm.
still be on autopilot, or have certain sort of strategies in place where you can actually do both? Is it possible to do both? And I'm not just talking about single parents, because there's a lot of teenagers that come out in a way where, even if it's from a home with both parents. So I think these strategies and tips that you are about to share is for both. And I know that the scenario is very different and the dynamics is different, so we will go through it separately. But first, we're talking about when they are actually in a home with both parents, and to deepen your connection. A lot of people find that difficult regardless, because I feel that whether you're feeling that you are healed or not healed, a lot of us don't even know. So are there any sort of triggers or things that you can actually sort of make aware of yourselves, that when it is filtering into your children, whatever you are to your children, does that actually reflect back?
Yeah. So with in any home, it's important to be aware of your thoughts and your feelings in the moment, I think, to start with. And so with my clients, I use what's called the lead with love methodology. And what that involves is being open to listening. L is for listening to understand your teenager, and not just for you to simply dictate or respond to them. And that's number one, really important, because I think as parents, sometimes we have this ego, this authoritarian ego, like, I'm the parent, I know better than my teenage child, so I'm going to keep telling you what you're meant to do. But validation from your teenager needs to feel validated and feel that connection. In order to do that, they're humans also. They have perspectives. So being open to listening, to understand what their perspective is. Then the O is for having that open dialogue with them. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his sunnah was to be compassionate, was to have the dialogue. There's many stories of how youth came to him with even the most controversial topics like zina and all of those things. And he didn't turn to them and say, Astaghfirullah, how could you bring such something to me? Instead, he engaged them in dialogue for them to understand what their perspective is, to hear them so they could actually hear themselves out in the dialogue and get to learn for themselves why there's certain things in Islam that we don't do. And again, that's another mistake that I see a lot of my clients make, is that, if they've grown up kids are heard but not listened to, like they're not to speak, really. And so know your place as a child, that doesn't work. Having that open dialogue, again, is part of our sunnah, it's part of our deen, to have that compassionateness for the teenager, and it bridges that, it deepens that connection. And the V in love is to validate their emotions. So if they are, that means validate what they're saying and what they're not saying, right? So if your teen is being disrespectful or being rude, there's a lot of clients that come to me about rebellion, right? Know that behavior is a symptom of something else going on. And so it's important to validate, and in the moment, be with your teenagers and just listen to what it is they're expressing. If they're expressing anger or frustration, echo to them, I know that you're feeling frustrated. I know you're feeling angry. Like, that's, to be there with them. Again, you have to be calm within yourself to be able to do this. But once you've dealt with your own emotions, being able to validate their emotions is important. And the final step is E, really entrusting the outcome with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a lot of parents, especially with the immigrant families that I see, is that they want to control their teenagers. Like, I'm going to choose your friends for you. I'm going to dictate every little decision that you make. And that is really not having tawakkul, not having trust in Allah, that there are some things that within reason, that you can allow your teenagers to make decisions on, or allow them to have a say.
Well,
And at the
Asumini,
end of the
you've
day,
given us so
yeah,
much so far, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop there for a moment because we are coming on to a short break. But you've given
yeah,
me so much food for thought, and we're going to come back into this conversation where I'm going to question you around all the things that you've highlighted, which is extremely interesting. And I'm glad you brought up the topics about validation and listening, and we are going to go into this a lot more deeper. We have a break coming up very soon. Please do stay with us. We're actually going to be speaking to Asumini, who is all the way from the USA, and she is very much qualified in this conversation. So I hope that you do stay tuned, as we will be coming back in a few moments to discuss this in much more depth. And inshallah, we will see you shortly. Please don't go away. And do stay tuned, as we are going to continue. And I really look forward to having you stream in and listen in the next part. Take care. Salam. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm having a wonderful conversation with my gorgeous guest tonight, all the way from DC, talking about leading with love to deepen your connection with your teenagers. Now, that is something that we always find very difficult. And what you said before the break was so interesting about all these amazing steps that we need to take as parents. Do you think we are skilled enough to even recognize that? Because what I really do find as well, when it comes to parenting, they have absolutely no idea, a lot of them actually, as to what a teenager thinks and feels and wants. And they just assume that those sort of behaviors, which is not that great, is just the norm. And it doesn't have to be, because like you said before, if they are aggressive, if there are behaviors that do not actually comply to what you think it should not be the excuses, oh, well, they're teenagers. No, we need to address it. A lot of the times, parents are not skilled, or they're too scared to address it, and they allow it to only evolve. And then it evolves into something that is a volcano that spews, that they have no control over. And then you talk about connection. Now, shouldn't that connection be built even from beforehand? Because as a teenager, you sometimes have that power struggle, thinking that you know better than your parents, even if you have a connection. So a lot of parents don't understand the mindset of a developing young person, and they are still developing. There is definitely a disconnect between teenagers and parents, regardless of the home dynamics. So when you are giving these kinds of step-by-step strategies, what are the challenges that come up that even stops you from doing it? Like, for example, a parent that wants to listen but also get respect, and they cannot get the respect from the teenager. What do you do then?
yes. And so if you don't get respect from them, it's important. I'm always a fan of every relationship is a mirror, right, of what's happening within you as well. So if you're not getting respect from your teenager, what is it within you that you're not doing to be able to gain that respect? I can speak on like some of the things I've seen. So teenagers, again, they want to be heard. They're young, they're booming adults, right? They're eventually going to be adults. So if any human being, if you're not heard, then it's also like you're not respected. If your viewpoint is not taken, then you don't have respect enough to take their viewpoint. So sometimes a lot of the teenagers that I've seen with the mothers that I've coached are that they feel that they're being controlled, they're being dictated to, they're not even, their opinion is not even considered. And so that's why they end up having this behavior that, again, is a symptom of what's the feelings underneath. They don't feel heard, they don't feel listened to. And then in some cases, some mothers are not setting limits enough, where compassionate limits, where they have drawn the line of like, here's my boundaries of like, that you won't cross, and communicating that with your teenager ahead of time, not just punishing when they disrespect, but actually talking to them about, hey, you know, I understand it seems like you're feeling this way. Is that the case? And engaging again in dialogue to understand what it is that they're feeling that's causing them to have this behavior, and to be able to say, as your parent, here's what I won't tolerate, and here's like the consequences of it, right? And like getting to that medium where you're still compassionate with them and setting those compassionate boundaries, but also engaging with them to understand where they're coming from. Why is this behavior the way it is?
That is so true. The other problem we do have is that there is two people always parenting, and those two people parenting may not always have the same parenting styles, right? And even if you're living in the same household, I come across a lot of clients myself. They saying that, well, my husband thinks that, you know, I'm too harsh, or I'm not too harsh, or not harsh enough, whatever it may be. So there is a clash of parenting styles. Do you think that confuses the kid, or do you think that's actually an okay thing to actually go through? Especially if you're living in the same sort of household, how would you manage something like that when there is sort of like disconnect in the way in which the parents see how they should bring up their child?
Yes, this is something that is really common with couples, and it's very important to amongst the married couple to really talk it out amongst themselves as far as like the parenting styles, find common ground. Not everything is going to be agreed upon, but there's instances, it just depends, right? Where one parent who has sort of the stern, able to set limits, might be able to step in more in some situations, and the parent that is more permissive, that those situations would work. It's important that the two parents come together, find common ground, agree on the consequences or limits that they're setting, and support each other in front of their teens, so that the teens are able to see them as partners and not two separate people that they can sort of manipulate between, and be able to like see them together as a team, inshallah.
In a household where the families are together, living together, even if there is a difference in opinion or parenting style, that can be sort of communicated and sort of compromised. But what about in a divorced parenting and co-parenting, where they don't really necessarily need to compromise and connect and, you know, make it easy for the other parent, especially when they're divorced? Now, this is a question I'm going to leave open because we are coming on to another break very shortly. So it's something for you to think about. And also for any of the questions that any of you guys have, because this is a very tough topic. And also for you to think about it as you are entering into new relationships, whether it's for the first time or for the second. What is it that you need to discuss with each other? It's not just about the wedding dress. It's not about the finances. It's about how are you going to be parenting together? What exactly is your way? How much do you want to give? How much do you feel that you need to receive from your partner? What are your values in bringing up children? These are really important questions that we don't even bring into the conversation when we are talking about marriage. Marriage is not just two people. It is actually, building a family, which will eventually, inshallah, for most, have children involved. And no one talks about that in the conversation initially. So we are going to discuss that when we come back from another short break. And assuming I'm going to give you a little bit of time so that you can process all that questions and come back to me with it, because it's really interesting. And I think that even for people that are thinking about marriage, we need to have these kind of, questions from the beginning so that we don't have problems later on. Inshallah. Please do stay with me. Join me after the break, and we will see you very shortly. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. We're talking about leading with love to deepen your connection with your teenager. Now, before the break, I asked you, Asumini, about co-parenting. Now, I mean, there is obviously going to be issues with regards to teenagers trying to see, who is the one that I need to listen to? What is the authority here for real? Is it both now? Because at the end of the day, how can we listen to both when it can be so different? And like we said before, when there are parents living together and they have different parenting styles, they can still come together and compromise. Whereas there's no real interest for parents that have separated, and they may still even have a really bad relationship between them. So when the children are going from one home to another, as teenagers, it is so challenging a lot of the times. How do parents maneuver through that situation where the other parent is not compromising, they're doing things totally different? And what does that do for the child? And what can you do as the parent who is interested in your child to make sure that they still get the best and they're not going to be affected and impacted in a negative way?
Yes, this is a very good question. And I think one important reminder is no matter whether it's a high conflict divorce, whether you have a great co-parenting arrangement and you are able to still talk with your ex, always remember that, the children are an amana to us, a trust as parents. So Allah designated for you to be the mother, for their dad to be the father, and that's a trust with Allah. So in states of conflict and when you don't agree with your co-parent, remembering that is important and putting Allah first in terms of what's pleasing to him. So a lot of the clients that I coach, when they have that high conflict, we spend a lot of time looking at what are our feelings in the moment and making sure that when you respond to your co-parent, you're not responding from a place of your own emotion, anger, or frustration, or things like that. You want to have that wisdom so that you're not bad-mouthing the other parent in front of the teenager, so that even if you don't agree with some of the parenting that's being done, you point the teens to what's pleasing to Allah. And I'll give an example. In my case, we have very different parenting styles with my ex-husband, but I know that he loves his kids a lot with how he raises them. And so even though we have different parenting styles, if the kids come to me and start complaining about something on my end, I focus on what I can control. And I'll say things like, we're not going to talk, you're not going to say that about your father because he's your father. Or, we're going to be able to, let's try and talk about what it is the issue is and work it out within what I can control without bad mouthing the other parent, without bad mouthing their dad, with pointing the kids to both of us love them and we're raising them in the way that we know is best, right? And so I think it's important to separate yourself from that situation. If your ex is still coming out with you with hostile words and you can't talk, that's the parenting has nothing to do with you, right? And your relationship with him. That relationship, ended. It's more focusing on that amana, that trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us with the kids.
Beautiful. I love what you say again. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't actually as much as they can have deen and they understand their faith, in those times when it comes to divorce, when it comes to the other partner, those all go out of the window, unfortunately. So what would be advice to parents, whether it's the mom or dad, who is bad mouthing, who is using their child as a weapon, who is actually, not actually concerned about their teenager in that sense, because that's just a way of just getting back at their ex. And even I've heard people say that, if he gets married, I'm not going to allow my kid in that household because it's with another woman and this, that, and the other. What would you tell that parent who feels like that? And what is it doing to their child? And is there any benefit at all to be that way? What would be your advice right here, right now, for anyone that is struggling?
Yes, for those that are struggling, and of course, this is in the instance where you're able to work together, and there's no abuse that's happening. So if there, it's again, I tell my clients, we coach them on focusing on what they can control. And so you can't control your ex-husband trying to use the kids and manipulation. I've seen a lot of clients that have gone through that. What you can control is how you respond to it. Are there limits that you want to place? Is it that you want to evaluate the custody arrangement and be able to go and shift that? If you're not able to do that, what you can control is building that relationship with your teen so they understand, what's right and what's not right. And unfortunately, it takes time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. I've seen cases where there has been alienation of the kids from the mother in this case, and she's been able to build that by focusing on what she can control. So the times that she spent with her children, she's been building that connection of getting to know what their feelings, how they're feeling around the different things that are happening. And then the kids themselves, the teenagers themselves, realize over time what's happening and what's wrong. But it's a matter of the mother choosing to exercise the limits on what's within my control. Am I going to try and work with lawyers to change the custody agreement? If not, let me focus in on the teenagers and what I'm able to help with it, building the relationship with them, inshallah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, yeah, what you just said as well, we do find a lot of bitter, scarred women, not all of them, and they may have, the courts in their sort of favor, especially in the Western society. I don't know about in the US, but in the UK, we've had many fathers that have come onto the show and saying that, they are trying their best, but unfortunately, when there is a divorce and one is not liked, the woman does, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, do take advantage of the fact that they have more control and they are the predominant parent, and they will actually use that against their ex-partner. So again, like you said, and I love the fact that you bring it back to our faith, that at the end of the day, it is a gift, it's a responsibility, and we are accountable for everything that we do. Unfortunately, like I said, in these sort of circumstances, most people are not thinking about their faith. They don't even have faith at this moment in time when it comes to fighting a battle with your ex, and all of that goes out the window, unfortunately. So we need to think twice, because we are raising beautiful young generation for the future. And we always think of teenagers as being troublesome. They're not troublesome. They're just trying to understand the world really quickly. And sometimes the world around us also forces them to make decisions really quickly. So there's a lot of pressure. And parents need to understand that even if they're older, they still need support. They still need love. They still need connection. They still need that validation, and respect works both ways, like you mentioned before.
Right. And
Now,
Sister Fahima, I wanted to mention one other thing, is that this is why I started in the beginning, that it all starts with you as the parent. If you don't heal, then you're going to give into that cycle of emotions and feeding into my emotions. And this makes me feel better. Let me go use the court system. This makes me feel better. Let me take the kids away from their dad. We all, as women, we're very emotional. I felt guilty of that emotion in the beginning of the divorce process. But once I
Simony,
reached
we
out
do
for
have a live caller, actually. I'd love to basically take that in before you continue. Salaam
Mhm.
alaikum, can you hear me?
Walaikum salam. I can hear you, sister.
What would you like to say? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I would like to say that It's a good topic that you have at the moment. And Sister Asumini is very, very good with her advice. I know from personal experience, I've suffered from domestic violence and marriage, divorce, breakup, remarriage. And I'm 54 years old, and I've spent more than 30 years of my life up and down this path. Alhamdulillah, things are very good for me now, but with my grown-up sons, things are very, very difficult. They seem to have blocked out a lot of the things that happened in my marriage and the fighting between me and my husband. And now they're starting, now that they are of marriageable age, and they're looking at partners, and unfortunately they are going out with girls. They are having relationship issues and they blame us. So me and my ex-husband have decided to, become friends and do the parenting. And just like Sister said, we've stopped blaming and naming. And basically, they wanted their father to explain why he made us homeless so many times, and we lived for 8 years in and out of women's refuge. But anyway, what I would like to say is that things can get very nasty between couples, whether they divorce or whether they separate. And it's very important to remember the children, especially when they're young. Don't think that because they're young they won't understand or they don't know what's going on. They know. Even a baby knows what's going on if there's an atmosphere in the house that's not good. I'd like to encourage all sisters and brothers to think carefully what they say in front of their children, what they do in front of their children, and if there's problem in the marriage, don't jump to divorce. Look at things like Relate and other organizations, and try some couple counseling, try other things, have individual counseling, have psychotherapy, work on each other, work on yourselves before you jump to the divorce. As we know in Islam, if you divorce your partner, you can't marry them again unless there are a few exceptions. But basically, it's not like the non-Muslims that, we'll get divorced, then we'll get married again. Doesn't matter. We'll go out with each other. We'll live together. We'll do this. It's very different for us. So please take into consideration your children's lives. Divorce is never a really good thing, but because Allah has made it lawful, of course, sometimes it's necessary and it is a good thing. But please focus on the children. Think of the children first, always, and keep harmony between yourselves. That's all I like to say. Thank you.
I love everything that you said. I really, really appreciate that. Really, really do. Thank you so much. I think you need to come on my show as well, and maybe I can have you as a guest to share your experience. No, honestly, thank you so much for sharing that. I really do appreciate that, and what you said was so.
It's a good topic, and I hope that will do a lot more at the youth and about young children. These are topics that are seldom covered, especially the younger. Many people are struggling with their young youth.
Absolutely. I hear you, sister, and thank you so much for calling in. I really appreciate the call. Unfortunately, we are coming into another break very soon, but inshallah, we will, answer and, pick up on what you said when we come back. But I do appreciate that. I'm so happy that you called in and, also feel safe to actually share with us your story. It is not easy. And again, I really do thank you for calling in. But please do stay with us as we're going to sort of talk about this a little bit more after the break. We'll see you shortly. Salam. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I just want to say thank you because before the actual break, we had a lovely caller that really shared her story and was so open with us and also gave some advice. And I really want to thank you. And I'm sorry that, we had to go to a break early, but, I just want to say if you're still hearing and watching, it was so vital that you share and you do actually call in, because it shows that these shows are here because there are people out there that do resonate. There is struggles out there. And that's why we have what we have each week, trying to actually give some sort of insight into our households, because that's what's going to build communities and make it stronger. And because we have so much against us in this world right now, especially where we are in the West, that's trying to break down the household, and we're trying to recreate that. And even with the struggle, as our caller mentioned, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but what you said was absolutely wonderful, that we should actually try and work hard. Asumene, what did you think, and what was your sort of like reply and response to our lovely caller that spoke to us before the break?
Yeah, I loved what she was saying about putting the kids first. You have all of these feelings within you. People are fighting, the husband, the wife, the ex-husband, ex-wife. But at the end of the day, it's the kids that we need to put first. And if you do, I think she also mentioned, like, if her kids blaming both parents about what has happened and maybe the things that they've seen during the conflict. It's really important to remember too, it's okay to let your kids know that you're sorry. Like, just turn to them and say, I'm sorry, we made mistakes. Just the acknowledgement of getting caught up in emotion or any mistakes that you've made along in the process is something that I think a lot of the teenagers would want to hear, right? Because they too are having their reality around everything that's happening. So showing that you two are human as parents and that you two make mistakes, and you're willing to work on them and work on the relationship. Like the young lady that called is saying they're working on their relationship as co-parents, shows them that, oh wow, like, our parents acknowledge that they made a mistake and they're human, and they can even feel safe to know that, and understand that when people make mistakes, they can still move to the right course, inshallah, and have that vulnerability to acknowledge it.
Absolutely. No, that is so true. I think a lot of, people that come out of any sort of, whether it's you being from a teenager into an adult and you want to go in a particular way, that's one thing we have to remember. There is always going to be some sort of, blame for whatever happens in our lives, whether it's our upbringing, whether it's, the environment, whether it's the situation. And I know that parents may feel guilty for, certain things that happen, but if you do the work, you will do exactly what you mentioned and, own it, but also don't, take that sort of like stance to say that that's now your excuse, because you now as an adult should also learn from us and do better. Don't use that, because that's why we have our faith, to keep us grounded, to know that there is the right and wrong. And just because you've been seeing what you've seen does not give you the excuse to go in a particular path. So you need to also stand up for yourself and say, yeah, I made these mistakes, but you can learn from my mistakes. And I'm sorry for my mistakes. But don't, go and, repeat, and let's break these boundaries, and let's break these kind of like, generational trauma by actually being better. Because, this is another thing that, a lot of people might use an excuse and continue in these kind of patterns of behavior. So the parent now needs to stand up and also give that advice and say, fair enough, do better than me then. Show me, and let's do it better. And I'll help you through it this time, and we can do the work. So again, sharing these kind of things is so important. And it's really important that we actually understand, children can make us and break us as well. Do you think teenagers, when they play up, I mean, it is so testing on a relationship. What are your thoughts on that? Let's switch it around a little bit.
Repeat that again.
I said teenagers can even, or children generally, can make or break a relationship, can make you closer, or they can help you, distance in yourself as even a couple. So what are your thoughts on that? Do teenagers really have that kind of, I would say, way of actually even making a relationship better or worse? Do you think they even have that kind of responsibility?
Yeah, so I think the question is, like, can a teenager break up a marriage, pretty much, right? A relationship, just the dynamics, right? And I think it's all in what you allow to happen, right? And so teenage years, yes, they're difficult, but it's important, again, to be conscious of your thoughts, your feelings in the moment, and always go back to every person in the home is actually having a different reality around a situation, right? They're having their own thoughts, their feelings. And so it's important to be open to the fact that if your teenager's behavior is being disruptive and your spouse has a different way of wanting to handle it, to be open to understanding their perspective on it and being open to sharing your perspective as well so that you can find common ground. And part of being open is not to come into a conversation like my way has to be taken and that's it. It's more of we're in this together to navigate this difficult time. And I'm open to hearing your perspective and your feelings and your thoughts. And I have my own as well. And I think that open understanding, again, the dialogue and the communication and being on the same page also in front of your teenager is so important. And that can help to alleviate any pressure or alleviate any chances of it coming in between both of you. And also spending time, just the two of you without the kids is also always so important as far as like self-care and being, building that love between the love and the rahmah and the mercy between the two of you. You need that alone time outside of the teenagers and the kids, inshallah.
Definitely, definitely. We did touch on it a little bit before, but before we don't have that long towards the end, but I do want to put that in here as to what do new couples sort of need to talk about when it comes to marriage? I mean, we talk about the general stuff, but should they bring kids into the conversation very early on, and if they do, what kind of conversations should they have around children before marriage?
Yeah, subhanAllah, this is something that I know that I wish I went into depth with before I got married, and we didn't do this. And I recently have youth that I mentor that are in their 20s, and they've just one that I can think of that just got married. And we talk about this all the time. What's important is to make sure you understand what's important about parenting for each of you. What are the things that you're willing to compromise on, whether it's like schooling, whether it's, whether I'm going to be staying at home because, you want a stay-at-home mom for the parents, whether it's okay that I'm going to be working, like talking about the nitty-gritty details of your expectations around parenting is so important before you get married, and understanding what you will be able to compromise on and what you're not able to compromise on, the deal breakers. It's really important. And a lot of people just rush to get married, and it's the honeymoon phase when you do get married and all you're thinking about is, I love this person, he loves me, and you're not talking about those hard topics. But it's important to get those questions out in the beginning, so that you understand where your partner's head is at as far as parenting and expectations for you as the wife and expectations for him as your husband, right? To understand how you'll be raising the kids together, inshallah.
Very important. Now, I know people are going to probably want to maybe get in contact with you, and we're going to try and get as many people to be in touch with you so that you can get them into the level that they need to be. So please tell us, where can people be in touch if they do need some extra coaching and help with this kind of, sort of scenario?
Yes, inshallah. I am on Instagram. You can, my IG tag is Asamini Kasule, my full name spelled out, and you can reach me there. I do have like free discovery calls to dive into parenting challenges so that you could also understand how I work with clients. My programs are really around one-on-one coaching, and I have a group program called Authenticity Renewed, which is groups of moms that I coach on how to deepen connection and take you through my program on Lead with Love, and all of the in-depth tools that go with what I've highlighted here, inshallah.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. We've only got like about a minute and a half left, and I still want to give you that opportunity to sort of, end this show by giving us some final thoughts, because we have discussed a lot and I still have so many questions, which unfortunately I can't get through, but I think we've given quite a lot of in-depth information. So please take it away for the next, minute and a half, just to give your final thoughts before we do end the show.
Yeah, I just want everyone to know, whether you're a mom or you're a dad, like there is hope in building connection with your teenagers. even if you're divorced or co-parenting, I've been through high conflict divorce, and now I see my kids have opened up so much to me, alhamdulillah, with applying my own Lead with Love methodology, and I've seen it work for a lot of my clients. And even if you're married and you might have conflict on how you raise your kids, there's also hope. It all starts with you as the parent. I would advise people not to just say, well, my teenagers are the ones with the problem, because it's not just any relationship. It takes two, right? So it's the parents and the teens that are contributing to it. So there is hope. Get the support that you need, inshallah, with coaching or any support that can help you to look within yourself and shift things that you're doing so that you can deepen connection. And I just really want all of your viewers to know that there's hope no matter what challenge is out there, inshallah.
That is absolutely beautiful and a wonderful message to leave on. I absolutely love that, because there is definitely hope. And I just want to say thank you so much, Esomini, for being with us tonight. It's been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. And honestly, I have so much more questions for you. So I hope to collaborate with you again. But I just want to say thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sister Fahima. And may Allah reward you for this platform that you're putting for all the Muslims out there.
No, it's my pleasure. And it's even better knowing that we have amazing guests like yourself. Thank you so much from all of us here on British Muslim TV. And inshallah, we, bless you for the work that you do. And hopefully you continue with much more abundance as well and success. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, watching, the caller as well. Thank you so much. All your messages. Have an amazing evening. And inshallah, we'll be back next week in time. Take care. Have a good night.